Good morning, Jose. How are you?
Good morning, Mukund. I'm well. How are you doing?
It's a wonderful day. Is it as cold in New York as it is here in Seattle? This is like ridiculous. It's 30 degrees here.
Same here. I think we're twins. It's in the 30s right now, and but it should warm up in the coming days and then falls back down again to the
You're
20s.
in upstate New York, right?
Yeah, for the weekend. Yes, I am.
Very nice. Very nice. Okay, so Jose, this week you actually had a lot of fun and you had a lot of work. You attended the NRF. Most people probably don't know about NRF, so just give us a little bit of a background. What is NRF? What did you do? And who comes there? Who comes to NRF?
Absolutely. So the NRF is part of it's a flagship program for the National Retail Federation, and they
Yeah.
have their big show once a year, and it is always held at the Javits Center in Manhattan. And it is attended by 40, this year it was 40,000 attendees who are C-suite retail CPG brand executives, VPs, and a lot of folks in tech because they have two floors, or they call them expo floors of level one and level three um, exhibitors. And in addition, they have concurrently sessions where one learns about the latest trends in retail. So you could attend and find new tech platforms in all flavors for retailers, CPGs, and brands. And at the same time, you're going to number two, uh, learn about the latest trends overall in retail in different, let's say, floors. And the last thing you're going to do is you're going to meet fellow retailers and network and understand what like-minded individuals are doing.
So is this your first NRF or have you been attending this quite a while?
No, I've been attending the NRF for over 10 years.
Wow. So mostly are this mostly US retailers or even people from Europe and everybody else?
No, 40,000 retailers with roughly, you could look it up online, so don't quote me, but it is a lot of the major passports from around the world. So firsthand, I saw folks from Europe across the board, so for specifically France, Italy. I saw folks from Brazil, Latin America. So retailers from all over the world. Anywhere where there's retail, you have folks coming in just for this show.
That's awesome. And what were your top impressions overall? Let's start with what did you what did you expect going in actually? Let's start with that and then we'll talk about your impressions. What were you expecting to do?
I was expecting really to understand the landscape and understand where iCustomer fits in within this landscape, and had meetings set up with folks to meet them to talk about iCustomer. But also, I was looking to understand, what are the general trends outside of our world? Because not just for us, Mukund, but for anyone listening to this podcast. Um, they're stuck in their day to day often, right? And it's important to go to whatever your trade shows or exhibitions or conferences are to kind of break out of the silo and kind of get a 20,000 foot view of what is everybody else doing and where do I fit in with this. So I was looking to glean insights as to what is happening and how we fit in and just meet like-minded folks.
And what were your top takeaways, for example?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, Mukund. So, if you take a look at what's happened over the arc of the last 10 years, 10 years ago, we were talking about big data. And
Yeah.
we know big data doesn't really mean a whole lot, right? And then last year, it means a whole lot, but nothing concrete is what I'm getting at. When we talk now, a year ago, it was about AI. AI was the big thing. AI means a lot of things, but it's still not concrete. This year, it was still AI, but it was more, the flavor was a little bit more specific. It was about agentic AI.
Mm.
And that seemed to be a big trend.
Agentic AI. Walk through AI of last year. Are retailers doing a lot with AI? I mean, retailers are probably some of the people that collect the most amount of data in the world, which is why they started talking about big data. They collect data from everything, right? It's an omni-channel experience, so they get a ton of data from transactions, they get a ton of data from their websites, and obviously customer purchases, supply chain. So they've collected all the data. What are they doing now with it? Have you seen any set of folks talking about here's what we're trying to do with it, or here's what we've done with it?
Yeah, good. That's a good question. Yeah, so last year it was about Gen AI, right? So a
Yeah.
lot of folks have started to incorporate Gen AI, and what I heard at some talks was that they are really embracing it, and it depends on the stage of the retailer. And what do I mean specifically? So, for example, let's say large CPG. So I saw a talk with Starbucks on stage, and they're talking about how they've been doing this over the years, and now they're looking to solve new problems with AI. So, for example, I learned, and I didn't know this, maybe you knew this, but that they not only have freestanding stores, but they have franchises. So anything that you see at an airport, Target, that is not freestanding, but is a shop and stop, or store within a store, it's a franchise. And so they have issues connecting data uh, across the POS systems or the sales systems, right, within the franchises and Starbucks in order to get everything, let's say, streamlined in terms of supply chain, communication, etc. And the big issue that they're working on now is leveraging, let's say, machine learning and potentially agents, right, to help them reduce the wait time for mobile orders because that seems to be a big pain point for them, right? It's not
Yeah, they do have a
as
new CEO. My suspicion is I follow the Starbucks stock as well, overall. So Brian Nichols, as soon as, I mean, he's done a lot of great things at Chipotle before, right? He was the
sure.
CEO of Chipotle. So as soon as he came in, my suspicion is that they're going to focus a lot more on solving the two, three big needle movers for them. Now, when I was in India about 10 years ago now for a few, um, the master franchise model seems to work very, very well there. So what that means is they have a master franchisor in India, and then master franchisor is responsible for all of the stores within India. Whereas now they're saying that they're trying to get this data from multiple different places in across to their systems, consolidate, coordinate that, and then make sure that they can have consistency across the stores. And I think the other big challenge, as you mentioned, the stores franchising is China is no longer growing as quickly for them as it is or it was before. So I think data coming in from China is also extremely challenging. I imagine just to be able to make sure that just getting that data in is going to be a challenge. China doesn't want you to take data out.
Exactly, exactly. And to that point, I just was looking at my notes here from that session, and they had five key things or values that they go with, right? And their five key values for digital transformation, if you will, would be one, you have to have a global mindset. Two, there has to be scalability, but they said also scale agility, which is something new that I've just
The
learned.
new word.
Exactly. You have to be value driven, right? Provide value for everyone around you in your ecosystem. Very simply, and this is very practical, you have to have tech that works. It just can't be tech for tech's sake. And finally, you have to cultivate relationships with your tech partners in order to make everything work. But that seems to be like something that's really driving everything and top down so that when they work on these algorithmic problems, the global problems in China that they're trying to resolve, or something much more, let's say, pressing for them, this is their mindset.
Is NRF also a session where e-commerce retailers come, or is it primarily, brick and mortar retailers?
No, everyone, anyone that is a retailer, and as we know, retail very simply is defined as a sale from a company to one end consumer. So anyone that fits that e-com, CPG, brand, retail, right? We call them different things, will be there. So you do have a lot of e-com representation there because often brick and mortar e-com tends to be usually, not always, usually it's the biggest store within a company's fleet, if you will.
Yeah, I could imagine. So when you look at e-com retailers, they get a lot of data. I mean, they get all the data that big retailers do in terms of online, whether it is social data, website data, on the website, off website data. And one of the things that you've been actually working with one of our potential customers about is this transformation that they're doing internally towards taking the growth that they want next year and the years coming forward and saying, listen, we don't have the right AI infrastructure in place to be able to do good decision making and decision intelligence, right?
Mhm.
Talk to me about how did you start the discussion with them in terms of I trying to understand where their goals are, where they want to be. Talk to me a little bit about that. How did they even come to that movement where you said, hey, actually, you're looking at all these analytics, you're looking at conversion. There's a better way to do this.
Sure, good, really good question. I think that there's often it's a conversation, right? Often it's about one talking to a potential customer and really understanding what they're doing. And as we say here, is we have uh, service as a software. It's pretty much white glove service. We're just not plug and play. I think that those days have passed. It's more understanding one, what is the problem? So it's a conversation starter, right? That's where we start. Then we try to understand what is their general context, right? What is their tech stack? What are their business problems? And of course, we do our own outside research, so it's not just the conversation, but we have concrete data to go by as well in order to begin this conversation. And then it's about understanding how to really make things work for them. And if we could help, that's awesome. And then in this discovery process, we start to understand and diagnose what the main issue is. And we have a pretty good idea of what their main issue is. And often enough, that main issue could be a symptom of something larger. And what I found in a lot of these discussions, Mukund, is that what's interesting is that everybody seems to have some sort of data problem, right? And so we're at a period right now where it's an inflection point where now we actually have technology where we could actually do things about it. Things don't have to be manual. Any type of data chaos can now, or any friction, if you will, can now be easily repaired, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that kind of makes sense a lot. I'm trying to understand also when we talk to customers right now, when you're talking to customers, most of them are probably asking the questions that every other non-retail customer is also asking, which is we've done some experiments with generative AI, we've done some experiments with AI. What is it that seems to be actually something that they have seen a return on investment in? Or is that too early of a question? Have they done any projects that they've said, oh, wow, this is actually a phenomenal ROI? I know I talked to, I was in a discussion with a couple of retailers last week, or week before, sorry, first week of January in an early discussion when I was in New York, and their questions were more, listen, we're doing some experiments. We've seen a little bit of ROI. For example, one of them immediately started talking about their customer service chatbot that they had put on their website. And now
Sure.
they're trying to move all their customer service, not just website customer service, but even people that buy it in the store. They actually have a kiosk in the store, which is powered by AI.
Wow.
So they have a little, machine type of a thing, box, kiosk, where you can actually type questions. You can speak to it.
Sure.
I believe there's a company called Bardi that they were working with, and they said, oh, Brody or something like that. They said it actually understands conversations just as a normal customer service person would. There are some glitches. It kind of sometimes becomes slow.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a few extra seconds, but that for them was very novel. They said, you can actually speak just like Jose and me are speaking right now. Imagine if you were an agentic robot instead of Jose, and you could also take the same kind of questions and you could answer the same way. That I think people are going to get starting to get used to. So back to my question, are people seeing more than just the initial ROI, or are they starting to see real ROI from deploying some of the generative AI that they're willing to invest more? And it's because, yeah, that's the question.
That's a good question. I think again, it depends on the size of the retailer, how big their team is, and that's usually indicative of their budget of what they're able to do. So yes, there are some folks that have invested in different ways, right? Not just what we're talking about. over the years, like Starbucks, right, has invested. Levi's is another one that's invested, and they're seeing, and they're big companies, so they've been investing in these things. SMBs or small to medium sized businesses have also been investing, but not everyone has been investing or been on this bandwagon. Because you have to remember, Mukund, the primary job of a retailer is to sell goods to an end consumer. And tech is secondary, but it's important, right? It's crucial. It's like accounting. If you don't have a finance or accounting department, can't pay your bills, can't collect on bills. On the flip side, with AI, the problems that they're addressing, and to your specifically to your question, yes, they're starting to see. Let's say chatbots were adopted by a lot of folks
Yeah.
last year, a lot of companies, because that was a little. It was on websites, right? So it's much cleaner, and that's been having profound effects because you no longer need a human being to do that. And I think little by little, what we're seeing, not just in retail, but many industries, is many things are becoming much more automated, right? And that's as soon as they see ROI and they have one a pain point from which to either solve a problem where it can be measured, then with an ROI, then they'll address it, right? And it's really interesting. So it's a short answer to your question is yes, and now they're looking towards this year to invest even more.
Most retailers tend to have fairly tight margins overall, right? So
Right.
the perception among a lot of tech companies is retailers tend to adopt a little bit more slower. They're not exactly the earliest of early adopters, but that's not what we are seeing across the board. Even though their margins may be tight, most of them are now betting on growth. There seems to be a sudden second wind for a lot of these folks. They're like, oh, we're going
Yeah.
to invest because we can see that this reduces margins. I'm sorry, this reduces our costs, it increases our margins, improves the customer delivery capabilities so we can compete better with online and so on. When you look at priorities for marketing executives, store executives, is that in line with, is AI among the top one, two, or three, or are there other priorities for them as well that may be more important or compelling?
No, actually, AI would be among the top three, as you said. Additionally, it's not just growth that they're looking for, but they're looking for business efficiency as well within marketeers or within the marketing GTM strategy world. What's happening is, Mukund, if you take a look at what's going on economically, let's take the US. In terms of the numbers that are out now, December was a strong month, and there was an increase month over month in terms of spending for consumers. And that's, as you know, roughly 70% of the US economy or GDP is based on consumer spending alone. So that's a big measure. And so the consumer spending really, if it continues the way it's been going in 2025, which is foreseen, it's a little bit unknown because, as you know, last year was an election year. So any election year is always difficult to predict. But now that there is more clarity as to what is going to occur this year in terms of politics, but everything else, because it's all related, then there seems to be more of a steady state. And so folks are bracing for a continued, hopefully embracing for a continued strong economy in the US. But as you know, as they say in finance, past results are not indicative of
Indicative.
future performance. But it is a data point, right, to take that it's been going north so far, and hopefully it still does. But people are bracing for that. And I give you this context because it answers the question that, yes, folks are now investing for the growth, right? But they're also optimizing for business efficiency in the event that things kind of level off, if you will.
Yeah. Our market is also looking to be able to improve the customer experience. One of the things that I think is very frustrating to a lot of people, I'll give you an example. Essentially, in Seattle and California, which tend to be the two areas that I frequent quite a bit, is whenever I walk into a store, in fact, any store except for Costco right now, everything is under lock and key. It takes about 7, 10 minutes just to locate somebody who can open something, even something as simple as toothpaste. I went to our local Walgreens and they have all of their toothpaste under lock and key. And So the customer experience is kind of broken to a certain
Mm,
extent. And if the price is the same online in Amazon and I get it within a day, it's not like I need toothpaste right now. Um,
right.
so that I think is a big challenge for a lot of retailers. What do you think they're using AI? And in our context, the data that they need to be able to manage that, how are they looking to improve the customer experience overall to make it easy for people to come online or buy it in store and still have that? Previously the big thing used to be you can touch the product, you can feel the product, some of
Sure.
these products like toothpaste, I don't know if I want to touch it anymore, right? Uh,
Sure.
what do you think is happening to the customer experience? That was my question. The customer experience has been mixed in offline for the last couple of years, especially after the pandemic. What are they doing to be able to use AI to help them with better customer experiences? And how can we help if we could?
Yeah, I think good question. I think look, offline or e-com wise, it's a journey, right? And I think that journey is broken. And I think that part of it is that systems don't talk to each other, which is something retailers are very familiar with. Any systems 10 years ago did not talk to each other. But now, if you take that problem within marketing, how do you stitch together a customer journey on a website for someone that's anonymous, right? And that's a problem that can now be addressed, right? If you have an anonymous visitor, you could start to enrich and understand, not completely, but you have a better sense of what's happening. And that's a way that we can help. If you think of how systems also talk to each other, let's take B2C from a Salesforce to Klaviyo.
Yeah.
What's missing is this, they have IDs, but they're all IDs specific to all the systems. So you don't have one singular ID that ties the single customer across the full customer journey, right? And that's a big pain point because if you think of what you're saying, experience, how do I know that it's Mukund coming to my website, right, anonymously, and stitch that together with the way I communicate with him, and stitch that together, let's say he's a loyal customer with the loyalty profile that I might have. It's difficult to do. It's not impossible nowadays, but what's happening is you have analytics teams within the companies that actually have to do this work on behalf of the marketing team or the GTM team. And so it takes a lot of time. It's inefficient, right? Because then you're there waiting for a report or waiting for someone to do some stitching or like analytics on your behalf when you could be doing that yourself. You know what questions you're asking if you're the business person, right? Leading the business in marketing, whatever it might be, demand gen, performance marketing, CRM, and you're waiting for reports. Now you could actually do it. Technology's here to do it on your own with a lens that is marketing based, but
Mhm.
also it is not technical, right? Even though the back end is very sophisticated, you don't have to see that, right? And I think that's what I'm seeing in the market, and thankfully that is something that we solve for here.
Are they talking about privacy in this context? Because we talk a lot about being privacy first ID, right? Which is we're not just going to track for the sake of tracking, but we're going to focus on privacy to make sure that the consumer laws that have been passed, GDPR, CCPA, are also things that we comply with. Was privacy a big issue? Was that even a question, or has it not been a
No,
big issue?
it's an issue, but it's not a question because right now it's like table stakes, right? It's you need to have that privacy. So I think it's let's say that it is implicit in the conversation, but you just need it to move forward, and then everything else is icing on the cake with the problem solving piece.
If you talk about another angle of marketing, which is online, how do people get to know you? Zero click attribution is becoming more important. I know one of our customers' attribution is very, very big, right? So zero click customer attribution, which is what that means is if you go to Google and search, if you go to ChatGPT and do a query or Perplexity or Claude or any of these others, and you ask questions like, which is the best AirPods or earpods that I should buy. The question is answered by that system. There are no links. There are some links, but nobody clicks on these links anymore. Even previously at Google, only the first link would get clicked. Now it is like you're giving me the answer. Why would I click anything else? As an example, right? Um, are customers starting to think about attribution in that context as well, which is you've got to build a brand, which retailers have always been strong about building a brand, not just transactional value, right?
Sure.
But how does zero-click attribution help in the context of brands, and what changes have you seen people start to do in terms of their marketing that we could focus on that maybe we could help as well?
Yeah, I think it really good question. I think in terms of that, it's something that wasn't talked about and it's more recent. And I think folks are now starting to understand that it's a possibility, right? And again, going back to the NRF, now everybody comes back with fresh ideas of what's possible. And I think that as folks start to realize that there are tools out there that could help them address this problem much more readily, they'll start to understand, I could address my pain point much more quickly, efficiently, and measure it with a metric. And that's where we can help them, right? As more folks become aware, it's like in marketing. Once you're aware, then the cycle begins in a positive way, of course.
Yeah. So we talked about attribution, we talked about analytics, we talked about big data, we talked about ID to be able to help improve the customer experience. Is there any topic that came up that you and I haven't discussed that you felt was an important one for the customer that you spoke with?
No, I mean, I think we covered it all. The only thing is one thing I will mention, there's this piece of uncertainty, right? In terms of which is why we implicitly tackled it, but I think it's important to highlight that this uncertainty of what the future holds
Yeah.
in terms of business growth or potential, let's say, stabilization, and they're preparing for all scenarios. But irregardless of that scenario, if you think about it, you still need to be prepared with good tech that solves your issues. So you have to identify your pain point, prioritize it, and then if tech makes sense, great. Sometimes it doesn't make sense. And if it does, well, here it is for you. And if it's marketing, I think, there's a lot happening here in marketing, which is a good thing.
Awesome. Jose, it was terrific to talk to you. This was a great
Likewise, Mukund.
session. I think NRF was a lot of fun as well for you when you went there. I remember every one of our morning meetings, which we do on a daily Scrum basis. You were there from the NRF, sitting in a corner, bunch of stuff happening, but you were still there. You were still in our meetings. You were still at the conference. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It was terrific to have you at this podcast. This is your first. This is your first movement in, so I'm happy and excited that you're here.
Yes, me
Thank you for
too.
the time.
My
Sorry, you
pleasure.
were going to say something.
No, me too. I thank you, Mukund. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here with you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jose. We'll talk to you in the next couple of weeks or so, and have a great time in New York. I'll see you back in Monday.
Great. Thanks, Mukund.